I have been waiting for this day. Dr. Mary Bell Carlson, Doc Jonathan Walker. This is so exciting to be here. We've got our members are coming in a little bit at a time here, so we're just letting everybody filter in here. How are you both doing today?
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is a great topic. It's always fun to talk about this topic and human behavior. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, and we need this topic so desperately. And one of the things that I really am excited about is like this is a 2023 book. Like what we're talking about is contemporary and you released it this year and this is what's on people's minds and I know that we're going to just help the people in the room. Oh, thanks for the clap. There's also too some really cool things. I don't know if this is going to work right now. Yes.
Oh, look at
Yes, yes.
that. So fancy,
So an
Tina.
appreciation and love for everybody here. So we've got, such an incredible day plan. So I'm gonna big shout out to everybody here that's joining us. I know that everybody's coming in. Let us know what is the temperature today, wherever you are. What's the temperature, and tell us where that you are zooming in from. So, hi,
Very
Brian.
cold.
Hi, Jim. Hi, John, Keena, Stephanie, Andrew. So excited to see you all. Thank you so much. So, yeah, let us know how. Okay, so we've got, yeah, it's really cold. No idea. I've been windowless in my office since 8 a.m. Oh gosh, Stephanie, you're right here. I would say, what does my phone say? It's got to be, oh, it's 44 degrees right here where we are right now. 60 degrees in Myrtle Beach. Mary, you haven't been outside yet. Jonathan, have you been
58,
outside?
58 here
58.
in Texas.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Um, so I was out actually outside, number one, to get here, intentionally did a community service project. We dropped off 34 gifts. We sponsored 17 kids this year for the holidays. So I haven't put it on social yet, but I'm going to share the what my car looked like. We had wrappings and gifts all over the place. Oh, Keena is at 73 degrees and overcast. We feel so sorry for her, don't we?
We just want to know where that is because we
It's a
might
rough
all
life.
be heading your way.
Yeah, 73 degrees, 43 in Rhode Island. Yeah, 73. Keno, where is that? I know it's in
In
Florida.
Oregon.
Yep, Florida. Exactly, Florida. Okay, so great. So sunny days, everybody, no matter where you are, close your eyes, envision that it's going to be warm here. Really appreciate you joining us for this hour of educational content. And I promise that you're going to be empowered. You're going to be inspired by today's conversation. Just going to quickly run through our housekeeping items as in our usual process, and then we'll get right to the program. So thanks again. We are right here, King of Prussia, right outside Philly studios at 44 degrees of Fahrenheit. Our special guest today, Dr. Mary Bell Carlson and Jonathan S. Walker from the Financial Behavior Keynote Group. They are co-authors of, I feel like we need a drum roll here, Anchors, Ostriches, and a Hot Pair of Scissors, Navigating Human Behavior as a Financial Professional. That's available on Amazon in Kindle form as well as paperback form. And before I introduce Mary and Jonathan, let me just start with a few introductions and housekeeping items. Most of you know me, Tina Powell, Chief of Community here at Intentionally, and today's host. And a big shout out to Kelly Waltrick, our co-founder and CEO, who is literally right over there. It was Kelly that actually brainchild the Intentionally and Friends book club as a way to share lifelong learning, contemporary ideas from today's top thought leaders. And that is Dr. Mary Bell Carlson and Jonathan S. Walker here. So I'm going to refer to Mary Bell. Mary, is it okay if I call you Mary throughout?
Mary is totally fine. In fact, maiden name is Bell, but many people
Oh,
always thought it was the same name. So
oh, wow. That's
fine.
interesting. That's how she's got a lot of impressive initials after her name too that we'll be going into. So, in order to get these updates, please make sure that you are subscribed at Intentionally to get the latest updates on the book club. You'll get the replay, and the landing page has since been updated too. So all of the other prior replays, and I'll also put important links in the chat. This book club is being recorded. And then if you are an author, if you would like to recommend an author, our email address for that is bookclub@growintentionally.com. Lastly, we are all in financial services. And even if you're not, we're super happy that you joined us here. This does not replace advice of with your financial professional. So definitely consult with a registered financial professional if you're looking for advice that pertains to you and your financial situation. So, okay, here we're going to kick it off. Everyone meet Dr. Mary Bell Carlson, founder, president, and co-founder of Financial Behavior Keynote Group, Jonathan Walker, a financial services executive, entrepreneur, managing partner at Financial Behavior Keynote Group. They co-authored Anchors, Ostriches, and a Hot Pair of Scissors. I just need an excuse to say that title every so often. Navigating Human Behavior as a Financial Professional. Again, I'm going to put the links in the chat in just a moment here. Copyright 2023. Mary and Jonathan, such a huge honor. How are you both doing today?
Oh, great. Happy to be here.
Great. Super. First things first, everybody, I'm going to put the poll in the chat, and you all know that, if you put questions in the chat, whether or not you use the general chat or just the questions, that you're going to be entered to win a copy of the book and a $50 gift card. So let's get to the first question. This one has been gnawing at me. So I'm really excited. So here's the first question. The name of the book, Anchors, Ostriches, and a Hot Pair of Scissors, Navigating Human Behavior as a Financial Professional, was derived from the following: Mary's idea, Jonathan's idea, picked the most random words and mashed them all together. So we're just going to let everybody take their time. This is, I have to say, one of the most interesting polls that we've ever had in the history of book club.
One of the most interesting titles too.
For sure. Okay, so right now we are over indexing at Mary's idea 56, Jonathan's idea 22, and option C 22%. So I'm going to end the poll right here. I'm going to share it with everybody and kick us off, Mary and Jonathan.
Well, I think since I got blamed for it, I better take the heat here. So this is really fun, Tina. Actually, that we were doing this type of thing, wondering about this time last year, what should we call this? And I remember, I think my title, and Jonathan, you may have to correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was a really exciting title, like Applied Behavioral Finance, helping financial, like you're already falling asleep, right? And Jonathan was like, no. So if you don't know the two of us, I'm more of the academic. Jonathan is the marketer. He should be the PhD in the two of us, but he's also the marketer. And he came up with this idea. And I remember the first time I heard it, I said, I'm sorry, what? Anchors, ostriches, and a hot pair of scissors? What are you talking about? So, Jonathan, I'm going to lead with that. Why don't you kind of take it from there as the marketing person?
So it's true. Mary did not like the idea. And if I remember correctly, she had to ask like 4 or 5 people what they thought of it, and only was turned around when every one of them was like, well, I'd read that. That sounds interesting. I want to know more.
I think that was it, because we walked away from it going, now we want to get away from the boring titles, which I've spent most of my career writing, because in academia, that's all you write is what it's about and puts people to sleep. But Jonathan came up with that. And it took me a while. It was kind of growing on me a little bit like mold, but we finally went with it. And really, I love it because it's intriguing. What are you talking about? Like, it makes people open the book, or he goes, if you're just looking on a shelf and you see that, you're like, that's not like the rest. So I will fully credit Jonathan with the title. And it's, in that case, It has. There's been more curiosity about the title, which, by the way, the title leads into what the book is all about.
It's so funny, right? And it's so interesting. Already, like Ricky chimed in here and said that you guys are already using psychology with the title of the book. And I
Yep.
totally agree with that. The other thing is like, I think you own the search terms. There's no other search terms that are competing. So it's like very easy to find the book. And again, for all of you that are looking for the title, I would say that there are links right now in the chat, and it's a 2023 edition with 111 pages. Really, totally easy, like to read. For me, it was a wonderful read. You know, I'm always looking for that. You know, those quick like sound bites and concepts to carry me through.
Yeah, and to
So
that point, one of the things we really wanted to do was keep it succinct. We know that financial professionals are busy, right? They spend their life dealing with a lot of different things and they're moving a lot. And so what we didn't want to do is write a really thick book with a lot of words. So we really tried to get right at the issue and make sure that we were giving some very practical ideas that could engage people, and it wouldn't take them a lot of time. What we didn't want was a slog.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember, Jonathan, in fact, being on an airplane and having come from a conference last year and getting someone's book that was about the same size. And I read it in one leg of an airplane flight. And if you can read an entire book on a flight, and I remember making notes in the margins and writing all over it. And I was like, that actually is a really helpful book. And I don't have to set aside my life to get through something that thick. And so then I presented this idea to Jonathan and I said, what do you think about writing a book? And it took some convincing for me on his part. So we both have to convince each other every once in a while. But that's really the whole intention of it is I had come up and said, hey, I'm giving a speech. I know that this topic is important and top of the mind for many financial professionals, not just planners, but professionals as a whole. And so this idea was born of let's make it really practical and make it simple and boil it down to 10, right? We could go on all day about behavioral finance and cognitive biases, but we just wanted to keep it simple. And we felt like 10 was the right mark with practical application after each.
well, my brain thanks you because we we had Dr. Wade Fowle's book was like this.
Yeah.
And he was our first guest
Opposite.
and I loved it. And I was like, this is a little daunting. So, you know, I know, Mary, that you're a PhD, CFP, got another set of credentials after that as well.
AFC. Yep. Yep. Well, and that,
Yeah.
so to your point, Tina, a lot of this came from the fact that I came from academia. So I'm a little
Yeah.
chuckling in the background because I would write and then Jonathan would go back and rewrite because I wrote in academic speak. I mean, I wrote with very heavy, very high level words. And we did a lot of rewriting on this because we wanted it to be as plain, simple, straightforward, and not another academic book that you had to gnaw on to understand.
Thank you. I love the fact that your co-author is a marketer and storyteller.
Yep.
So too,
Great
it's
at it.
really great. So now, you know, obviously, who is the book for? You know, we know that, you know, financial services, but you know, what were you envisioning in terms of like writing the book? What problem were you looking to solve for, and who the book is for?
Sure. I think I'll start out. Really, we wanted have both of us were devourers of behavioral economics, behavioral
Mm.
finance. There are so many prolific authors, and I remember having a conversation with Jonathan just about the book Nudge by Richard Thaler, and thinking that's great. It's pretty thick. It's not necessarily long, but the meat is very content heavy, and so you had to really dig in to do that. And we thought, you know, Malcolm Gladwell is a really good example of a great storyteller who can go into deep concepts, but keep it understandable enough for the primary audience. And so we kind of wanted to go more the Malcolm Gladwell route rather
Mm.
than the Richard Thaler or other. There's so many great behavioral economists out there that we wanted to synthesize their work and make it digestible instead of just a laundry list of go read all these books. and then good luck applying it to your practice.
Well, and one of the things that I had done for the last 10 years is I'd worked for financial services companies, but I've also worked for a nonprofit organization where we
Mm,
studied the new middle class. And one of the things that I experienced over and over again is this belief that numbers will always win, right? If you can just put the right data in front of someone, they will always make the right decision. And so much of financial literacy has been plagued with that idea that, oh, all I need to do is give you the right answer and you will rationally see the right answer and you'll do the right thing. And what I found in my history of customer experience management and interacting with people and talking with a lot of consumers is that's not how people think. There's a lot going on. And if we don't understand how they think, we might as well just have robo advisors, right? I mean, if all it is a numbers game at this point, you don't need humans, but we know that's not the case. People are still going to need to make the decision. And today, financial services professionals, it's far more crucial than ever before that you understand how to present the decisions so that people are making the best decisions for their long-term success. And we are kind of past the point of believing that, if they don't make the decision, it's their fault. We kind of have to own some of the responsibility of
mm.
that and make sure that we understand what it is we're asking when we're asking people to make decisions, especially hard, intellectual, or rational long-term decisions.
That's an incredible insight right there, that we need to own the responsibility of helping our clients to make smart decisions, and not just like not let them off the hook, not let them um procrastinate into the future,
And
not give
and
us
to blame
excuses,
them.
and to blame them, right? And to not to see some of those biases that you talk about in the book, which is the things like that we could be doing on our behalf that actually make them behave the way they do. Some of it is that we are absolutely to blame, not in a bad way, but because we just don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Okay. And then, obviously too, you're both in financial services here, financial behavior keynote. I see you everywhere. In addition to that, though, and I love the contextual information of financial professionals and looking at the home life. And I loved the opening of your book and who your dedication, I think, like I first go into as an interviewer here, that I'm so curious, like it's one of my most interesting questions is like, who is the book for? And Mary, I know I love this juxtaposition that you're a mother of girls and Jonathan is a father of boys. And it was like, wow. So the two worlds kind of coming together, right?
Right.
What is life like as a financial professional, mother, father, parent during the holiday season right now with all of this like emotionality?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're all hands on deck. Mine are little. Jonathan's are older and leaving the nest, but yeah, my girls are 8, 6, and 3, and so it's really fun. I even want to back up a bit, Tina. Really, my impetus for writing my first ever book was my grandmother. And that is
Mm,
because she only received an 8th grade education, and my father only made it through high school because they simply couldn't afford anything beyond that. And
wow.
so there was a real connection to her when working on this book and thinking through. She's one of the most prolific readers I've ever met in my life. You always see her with a book in her hand. And so I sent her one of my first copies of the book because it had meant so much to me. But that was in the back of my mind of something I had wanted to achieve in my lifetime. And I wanted to do it when my grandmother was still alive, as well as something that my girls could get behind. Now, granted, we were kind of MIA for several months while writing the book. And so it was kind of good to see me back as a mom, but also they now keep the book on their own bookshelf today.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Mary, Jonathan, how about you? How did your family react?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little bit different because yes, I have only boys, but they're all older, right? My youngest is now 16, almost 17, and most of my boys have left the house. So right now, everything's pretty quiet. My 16-year-old complains that we're boring. And my wife likes to remind him that, hey, it took a lot of work to get to be this boring and we've earned it, right? And so we're excited. And in about a week or so, we'll get them all coming back home and it'll be exciting. But what is kind of fun about them at this age is I'm now seeing the world through the new 25-year-old and the 20-year-old and the challenges that they're facing and what they have and frankly the questions that they have. We forget that no one is born understanding what an Roth RIA is, right? I mean, the reality is we just assume that people will get it. And it's kind of fun to see the world through these young people's eyes and start to realize just how much information there is and how much complexity we have in the world and what we need to do to simplify that and make it clear so that they can make good decisions and establish kind of good financial habits for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Do you think I have my own biased view on this. Do you think that being a financial professional and being a parent at the same time, that your kids are just more likely to show even a curiosity? Are there more conversations around the dinner table around finances and things that, that didn't necessarily happen in my generation just because my parents didn't have the knowledge, to your point?
Yeah, I
Certainly there's a
know.
frankness. Yeah.
Mhm.
A frankness in the conversations.
Absolutely. And I think it's the comfortability too. I remember growing up, we never had conversations about money. I to this day don't know what my parents make. And yet my children were very open about it and have a lot of conversations about what that is. So I think it's also what are you comfortable with? What can you share? And the more you know about it, the less overwhelming or scary or a topic that you want to avoid it becomes. And so it becomes like a normal. In fact, I'll share another quick story. My husband is a psychologist by training, has his degree in clinical mental health, knew nothing and cared, hated money. Like it was the bane of his existence, grew up in a very different life than me. And I remember on our second date, I was like, so let's talk about finances. It was no problem for me. It was big problem for him. And so I think that's part of like learning these things is being comfortable with talking about stuff that's maybe hard. And so going back to the book, that's why we wanted to break it down so simply because it can be really overwhelming sometimes to read a list of all these behavioral biases and be like, so what? What do I do with that? Right. And so making things digestible and understandable and relatable, it's kind of fun now, or maybe nerdy of me to bring up these things in conversations. I had a telemarketer the other day call me and I was like, actually, that's this bias. And went off and he was like, what is she talking about?
Ah,
But
well,
it makes it
sorry,
fun.
go ahead. I
No.
can't wait to dig into some of those biases. And before we do, we've got the scissors question, right? Because the scissors really factor into that book. And chapter 3 talks about Simon Scissors. So we're gonna start to get into some of the some of the biases. And again, a reminder, we appreciate you all so much. Please, if you have questions, and they could be related to the book or they could be related to anything that's on your mind. We've got one right over here right now that I'd like to ask. I'd like to ask after we hit the scissors question really, really, because I know that you've got a great answer for this, Jonathan. How does this theory explain how we've been involved to make decisions?
Yeah. So what's really fascinating is this hot pair of scissors. There's a lot going on in the hot pair of scissors. And there are three components that control and influence how we make decisions. And the pair of scissors is this idea of what we call a heuristic. And a
Mm,
heuristic is a mental shortcut. It's the way we've developed over eons of evolution to take very complicated decisions, complicated information, and make simple and quick decisions. And those quick decisions are based on what we call heuristics. But a heuristic all by itself doesn't actually do anything. You need the other part of the scissors, which is the environment. The environment in which you are placed against the other blade of the heuristic helps you to make that decision. In other words, there's no such thing as how much should I put in my 401k heuristic, right? There's no decision that we have developed to make that decision. The question is, when we're deciding how much to put in our 401k, what's the environment that that decision is placed in front of us that will dictate which heuristic we use and how we might make that decision? Those are two of the aspects. The third aspect is the hot. And that the question is the hot or cold state. And the hot or cold state is, how emotionally charged are we when we are making that decision? And let me give you a really simple example. If you go grocery shopping when you're hungry, you're going to make different decisions than if you go having just eaten a big Thanksgiving meal. And the environment hasn't changed. The decision hasn't changed. Where they put the candy bars on the end cap haven't changed. What's changed is you're in a hot state or an emotionally charged state or a cold state. And by and large, when it comes to financial services, it's really important that we do everything we can to make decisions in a cold state. And the reason we want to do that is because we're not selling Hershey candy bars where we will only sell it if you're hungry and you grab it. We're actually asking people to make the best decision they can for their long-term future. And that's best done emotionally, it's best done intellectually and rationally, and less effective emotionally, where what we want is what we want right now. And so the Simon scissors, the hot pair of scissors, is all about the three components that dictate how we end up making decisions.
So we should be more, I guess, aware as financial professionals, what states out of all of those three things, knowing if our clients are in a hot or cold state, maybe asking some qualifying questions to determine that, right? Because they could be masking something. It's not unusual for a client to come in, sit down with their advisor, and to be trying to disguise a hot state, right?
And that's
Yeah.
exactly right. And one of the biggest challenges to that is the state doesn't even have to be, oh, I just fought with a friend of mine before I walked in. It could be, I don't understand numbers. I want to fight and flight. You're throwing something at me. You're asking me to make a decision. And what you need to do is drop the temperature and find ways to figure out what emotional state they're in. And maybe, whether you can figure out what the triggers are or not, what really is important is making decisions that can cool that temperature so that they can make a rational decision about what they're doing.
And that's one of the things we do throughout the book, is do application after every one of these biases, so that as a financial advisor, you don't have to go and get Psychology 101, but really what to do if you do have a client in a hot state that's experiencing an anchoring bias. Then how to affect that and how to make change.
Yeah, it was one of the great things about the book is that you're not just talking about the conceptual aspect of what the biases is, but then providing a series of applications. Again,
Yep.
very digestible, and even that is a concept that was talked about in the book. I
Well,
want to
maybe I can clarify real quick. I saw a question come through.
Yeah.
Let me clarify that a heuristic is the shortcut that we take in making a complicated decision. The bias is the predictable way in which that heuristic can misalign with what an effective decision. And so the reality is, you cannot, there's no way that you can avoid your heuristics, right? That's how our brains work. So the idea of avoiding a heuristic is a little bit like avoiding breathing, right? You can try, but it's not going to work out well for you. But avoiding your biases, if you better understand the heuristics, you can you can start to understand a little bit about how those heuristics might lead you astray, and when they might lead you astray into a bias that will kind of upend the most effective decision. So you can't escape the heuristic. You might be able to escape the biases if you're a little bit more aware, but you can't be aware of everything, because otherwise you don't put any socks on in the morning. right? Because you can't make any decisions without
Great.
deep rational thought.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Ricky, for that question. Jonathan, we appreciate the answer. This is for you, Dr. Maribel Carlson here. Keena's question, can you
Mhm.
share the psychological and physical effects of storytelling, and can you provide some insights on how storytelling can improve well-being? I love that question as well. Really
Well,
good.
let me actually use it as a story and share an example. And I'm going to go back to even the title. So let's talk a little bit about anchoring bias a bit.
Mm,
Anchoring bias is when someone feels really stuck in something, and really it comes from very early on. Let me share an example of my own anchoring bias. I remember very early in high school, before I knew of any personal finance, I had a business teacher that said, when you should open up an investment account. And by the way, let's just remind everyone, this is not good investment advice, nor shall you take this investment advice. But she said you should invest in stocks, and you should buy companies like, well, what do you do every day? I eat cereal and milk, so therefore you should invest in Kellogg and Borden, was her rationale, because that's what people do, and so that's how you invest in stocks. Well, fast forward a decade later, when I am opening up my very first investment account, you can guess what my first thought and intention was to buy. It was Kellogg's and Borden, because that was an anchoring bias that I had been anchored to early on in my
mm,
youth. And it was very hard for me to change that. Now, that's kind of a silly one for many financial services advisors, but you've seen in those clients maybe some irrational thought that you're thinking, where in the world did this come from? And it could be something very early that anchors them. And so for me, a lot of times what I do to help share that is, the worst way to react is, well, that was stupid. A much better way to react is sometimes sharing a story and helping relate. Now, make sure the story is not all about you, but it's really helping relate to that client and saying, I had that same thought one time. I didn't know what to invest in either. And I recognize very early and kind of get into that way. With sharing stories, I think stories are such a powerful tool to use as a tool to be able to relate to other people and to share a story or an example that can be multi-layered, even to where people understand it and can develop it to their own lives. I think there's a balance in sharing stories, because we don't want to make the whole conversation about that me, and it's really about the client, but it's helping them progress or see it from a different perspective or gaining a journey along the way. And that's how anchoring biases, by the way, are really hard to remove, but it's helping them see a different perspective. And when you get a very different perspective, when I went overseas to Ireland and South Africa, I saw a very different perspective of the world than I saw here in America. And I think that's what we're trying to do with removing that anchoring bias and giving different perspectives on what that could be like.
Well, and one of the coolest things about storytelling is it invites the person to get out of their head, right? The essence of storytelling is empathy. And empathy is
mm,
seeing the world
mhm.
from a different point of view. And if you tell a story, and it doesn't have to be about you or anything else, you tell a story and you're inviting them to kind of step out of their own perspective and see the world from a different point of view. And that's a really effective way to help reframe which heuristics someone might use to make a decision, because it also has an effective way of kind of getting you out of the hot state of making a decision, because you're essentially storytelling wise looking at a different person making a different decision. And so it can be an extremely effective way of helping us see beyond kind of the cage within our own head.
Cage within our own head. That's also too. So you're encouraging us to prepare our stories. Is there one story right now that as financial professionals are going into financial advisors, professionals, just people working in the industry right now, as we are, it's a time of year. It's a time of year where we're getting together with our families, holidays, gratitude, thoughtful giving, all of those things. Is there, can you recommend like a theme of stories as we, kind of prepare? Because sometimes actually having that story in your back pocket as part of your meeting, as you're looking at your deck and as you looking at your agenda for the clients? Is that something that you recommend, or is the framework just like, hey, as you hear information, if there's a story that you can use to, to bridge that knowledge gap and to show that kind of empathy, that's how we should approach storytelling in our practices?
But actually warned to not have pre-canned stories. It's fine to think of those and maybe come up with some that relate to a specific example or something you're doing along the way. What I would recommend, especially during the holiday season, is to learn to listen. And the more you listen, a lot of times when you're trying to think about how you can bring in your story, you're actually not really hearing what the person across the table or sitting on the couch next to you is saying. And so
Mm.
that's how I would approach the holiday season even more, especially for those loved ones, is how can I be more present? How can I be a better listener? How can I really focus my time and attention on what them and what they're saying rather than trying to remember a canned story that may or may not help? I mean, we've all been in those situations where you're maybe in grief or you're having a really difficult time and someone jumps in and says, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel. One time this blah, blah, blah happened to me." And you're just like, go away. Like, that is not helpful. It's quite rude, actually. And you're not getting me where I need to be. So that's how I would approach the holiday seasons, less thinking about the stories you can require or come up with, and instead go into it of how can I be present? How can I really hear what
Mm.
my spouse is saying, my child is saying, or in client meetings, even? How can I really be present with that client? Because at the end of the day, that's why you're different than the robo advisors Jonathan mentioned at the beginning. You are a human, and humans with that ability to connect with other humans, that is what you have. It is the relationship that is going to connect you back.
And you need to be really careful that the person sitting across from you isn't a problem to be solved.
Yes.
Right. And that's one of the risks of behavioral psychology, is that you may look at them as this ball of neuroses that you're supposed to unravel. And that's a very counterproductive. So the idea of understanding these behavioral heuristics that we have is not about kind of pointing them out to other people and trying to get them to recognize that they're being irrational, because the reality is these heuristics are absolute genius. They're really clever, and they're not a bad thing. The reason we wrote the book isn't so that you can kind of start pulling them out and pulling the, hey, you're being anchored card. Let's, unravel that. It's so that you can identify what might be happening. It's not you. These should never be, knowledge of behavioral psychology should never be used as a bludgeon or a hammer. It should be used to help you understand what might be going on in someone else's head, so that you can better connect with them as a human being and help them make the right decisions.
Wow, great information. I can't wait to listen to the replay as well too. A lot of things I'm just writing like crazy here with my notes.
Let
Yeah.
me answer one of Stephanie's questions
I
that
was
some of you
about
may
to go
have.
there. Thank you so much. And I should say that, we are, again, lucky to have some really great advisors, Stephanie being one of them, founder of Sophia Financial right here in the Philly area. So I would love for you to tackle her question.
So Stephanie's questions essentially is, how do we're always told that clients don't want to be told they're falling prey to behavioral financial advices. So what is the academic explanation doesn't help in their headed moment? And I think what she's getting at here is just what Jonathan addressed, right? Is the fact of the matter is you don't point these out for other people. But I want to go back to Stephanie's academic side, because
Hmm.
that's a lot of what we've seen in the past, and why we wrote the book is usually what financial advisors get told is go read the book. Well, the book is a list of here's all the behavioral biases, here's what they all mean, here's maybe a couple of ways you could apply it. Good luck. And that was completely opposite of our intention. There are over 200 behavioral biases and counting that are being discovered all the time. The point is not, it's not a dinner topic conversation where you're going to bring up all 200 behavioral biases. Instead, it's getting to know what a bias looks like or how it could be done and how to work around that, right? What is the shortcut to get around that bias? Because it's less about knowing the actual name of it and how it applies and more how to make that connection. So I would say, Tina, and a lot of what we're doing in this book is how to enhance your relationships, how to enhance your communication skills, your listening skills, your ability to relate and connect with other human beings. And biases is one way to look through that hose, like even behavioral finance is one way to look at it. But at the end of the day, it's human behavior and that connection. And that's what matters the most. So regardless of what academics call it, and we don't have a laundry list, it's really important to know, how can I better relate? How can I better connect? And what does that mean? What does that look like?
I love it. And along those lines about what does it look like is the perfect time for our second poll. So everybody, the second poll is this: the military coined the term bluff, which means you can all see the answers, ABC, bottom line up front, binary logic, unification function, bilateral linguistics, understanding federation. Yes, we're talking about behavioral finance. So, it's wonderful to read these books because you get exposed to new knowledge and new ideas. So we've got 80% right now, say bottom line up front. And we've got 18%. We're going back and forth a little bit. Binary logic, unification function. Okay. Now we're at 77. We're almost at 75-25. What is the answer?
Bottom line up front. And I will take the blame on this one. We can't throw that one Jonathan's way. No, this comes from my military background and having worked for the Pentagon and military and intelligence worlds for the last decade plus. And so that was always what was drilled into me is, give me the bottom line up front. And so they very busy, always doing something, but we would give presentations to generals and to top military professionals. And that's what they wanted to know. In one sentence, what are you talking about? And so we applied that same concept in the book. A very short, what is this? So you could go back, quickly study it and remember, and you didn't have to waste your time kind of sorting through all the minutia.
And I really like that concept because, again, as financial advisors, an end of year meeting, right? An end of year meeting during this time and going into the next year, there might be more items than not that a financial professional is talking about, right? Tax, estate, gifting, investments, making some last minute, maybe tax maneuvers and whatnot. So what my takeaway from this was that, okay, whatever that thing whatever's the most important aspect of that meeting, bring that up front, present it up front, definitely repeat it all throughout, but put it up front so that it's top of mind, right? Would that be the correct application?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of the
Okay.
heuristics that we find in human beings is what's called the primacy effect. And the primacy effect is that people tend to remember the first thing mentioned, right? And so what is interesting about that is that you can leverage that reality by using bluff, right? When they walk in and they sit down and you're going to talk about something, if you know there are 5 things you want to talk about, but one thing that's the most important, you can even lead with by saying, hey, I just want to start out by saying, the most important thing that we want you to come away with is understanding blah, 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 blah. But we're going to also talk about these other things. So you've already, even if it's the most important thing at the end, even if you tell them, hey, we'll get to the details in a second, but this is what we're going to talk about today. You have that ability to do that. And knowing that primacy effect, we're also kind of crazy humans. And the first thing isn't always the only thing, right? For instance, when you walk into a financial planner's office, the first thing you see might be the receptionist or the environment, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily the only first thing. When you sit down with them, you could say, the first thing I want to talk about today, and you've got a second first thing, right? And so you can leverage this idea of the primacy effect to make sure that what's most important is being elevated in the conversation And it is the thing that is sticking in their minds from your conversation.
Awesome. Love it. A question for you, Mary, because
Sure.
there's another bias again, but lots of biases in the book and biases beyond the book, probably included in the next book. Is this idea of mental accounting? It was introduced first in the chapter. I never thought of mental accounting as a bias. Again, I think that as an outcome of reading the book, I became more aware of my environment. Like, things that I wasn't normally aware of. I would never in a million years think that mental accounting is a bias as well, too. But when I read it in the chapter, I was like, oh, that's what they mean.
We've all done it before. In fact, I already see people say, I love mental accounting. I'll do it. Right. I think one of my favorite questions is asking clients, so tell me, what do you think you spend on groceries? What do you think you've spent this year on XYZ? And they're like, oh, yeah, this is what I spent, as if it's fact, because this is where it lands, right? And for them to be able to do that, I'll give you another really good example. I had a client a while back that she had put in her savings account, had saved up over time, had about $70,000 in a bank savings account. Again, we're not giving investment advice here. I don't think I'm
Right.
not including that to be the best place to put that. But she had about $70,000 there. She also was carrying about a $70,000 balance on a credit card, on several credit cards, actually. And so when she got referred to me, it seemed pretty easy, logical math, right? You should put it in this and pay it
Mhm.
off. Done. That seems like a very logical way to move forward. Well, boing, there comes mental accounting, in that for her, she had labeled that savings account as her emergency savings account. And this was not an emergency. What was on the credit card was not an emergency.
Hmm.
And so at the end of the day, my 2 plus 2 did not equal 4 and erase it all. It really required a whole different train of thought. And we had to come up with a different plan for her to be able to pay down that credit card debt, because her mental accounting had been so attached to what that is. So we go back to this idea of labeling things and putting in like mental accounting of, oh, yeah, I spend, I don't know, $500 on groceries and never eat out. Well, in all reality, over time, you start to see, yes, I do. And then you label things that really matter to you. So, and that's all we've done, by the way, with 529 plans, 401k plans. They're just retirement buckets that are labeled differently. And therefore, we save differently for that. So, utilizing the power of mental accounting in a way that can be beneficial as well.
I love that. Anything to add on that, Jonathan? That was a great explanation.
Yeah, so for me, mental accounting is is a great example of a heuristic, or how we think, that
Mm.
can be good or bad, right? We automatically think of these heuristics and these biases as all bad. They're always going to trip me up. The reality is, mental accounting is a great example. For instance, if you are saving for 4 different things, my recommendation was always, you should have 4 different savings accounts, right? Because if you have one savings account and you've got $2,000 in that, you're accounting that $2,000 for each of the 4 things that you're doing, and you're probably not as far along in saving for them as you think you are.
Hmm.
But if every bucket, if every goal that you have has a different savings account, then it's very clear to have money that's sequestered, right? We know money is fungible. It can be used for anything, but mental accounting says money is not fungible. Emotionally, money is not fungible. Where the money comes from makes a difference to how we think about it and what it's worth and how we should use it. And we can either let that trip us up, like holding too much credit card debt when you could clear that out, or we can use it to further our long-term goals by making certain pockets of money too hard to emotionally spend, so that we save it for the purposes that we really want to use it for.
Yep.
So what we're hearing from the both of you right now is like how all of these biases can be used to actually help your clients. This isn't
Totally.
this isn't a this is a really empowering this was a really empowering conversation. Along those lines, poll number 3, is this idea of the spacing effect. Again, I love that these concepts are easily digestible, and you see yourself as you're reading through the book, you automatically are triggered into something that within your own life that relates to this. This one, I love this. Humans retain and can apply knowledge more effectively when acquiring knowledge over time and spaced out questions. Is that true or is that false? And we are getting a 92 to 88. 92 versus 8%. We're going to end the poll. What is the answer here?
Absolutely true. And let me go back to what, because this relates a lot to primacy effect. If you think of primacy effect a bit like bookends,
Mm,
right? So as Jonathan said, it's the first thing you talk about, but guess what? You also need to bring it up at the end, and it may not be the last. And that's where these two things work really clearly together. Is, let's say there's something, let's use estate planning. I feel like estate planning is always a really good example for
for
these types,
sure.
because there's a lot that goes into estate planning. It seems very simple. Oh, just write up your documents, tell people where you want it to go. There's so much emotion and so much attachment, and it can be years. In fact, I'm kind of chuckling because my own parents have been saying for about 3 years now, we need to update our estate plans because you children are still going to your aunt. Well, guess what? We're all grown and married and have children of our own. So it's been a few years since they've updated that. But keep in mind, with spacing effect, these are really hard concepts. Maybe,
Mm,
maybe technically, maybe emotionally, maybe both. And so it's going to be something, if that is the number one thing you're wanting that client to know about, put it at the top, mention it at the end, and you're going to have to talk about it over time. And don't try to throw all of it at them at once or force hard deadlines that maybe don't fit that timeline. Um, with that thought, though, go ahead, Jonathan. You've got something.
Well, I was just going to say, and you don't need to be boring about it, right? You need
mm,
to recognize that the more complicated the topic that you're trying to convey to them, the more often you're going to have to bring it up. But one time it could be an analogy, another time it could be hard data, it could be a graph, it could be, I mean, you just need to recognize that if you're feeling frustrated because you're like, we talked about this last time, how do they not get this? Then what you're doing is you're falling prey to the idea that because you've learned it over time, you think that they should be able to learn it quickly. And the reality is, all of us take a long time to really internalize complicated ideas. And we need to afford our clients the same privilege of learning complicated concepts over time.
And that also brings up the really good point of staying away from the financial jargon we use. Let's break it down, make it really straightforward. And I tease all of my fellow academics that have years, PhDs in this stuff, and they're like, I don't understand why my Intro 101 students don't capture this. And I'm like, well, it's probably because you've been studying it for 30 years and they're getting started their first week. And so keeping that same concept in mind with your own clients. Another thing that I think is really important between this primacy and spacing effect is don't try to put too much on the plate at the same time, because that can lead
mm.
to yet another bias, which we call choice overload bias. And in that type of a bias, in fact, I'll give you a really tangible example. I had worked with a financial planner for a while that used to put on the, after the meeting, he would have a little bit of a checklist, I would say, of here's what you need to do. But that checklist would run for the next 2 decades.
Oh
It would tell
gosh.
them when to go to the doctor, when to talk to their social, when they were taking Social Security. I mean, it went really long out. And I would just be like, holy cow, I am overwhelmed just looking at this thing. And so that's what we're meaning by primacy and spacing effect, utilizing both of those things in tandem to bring up the most relevant and most important thing that they need to do today. Going back to the bluff concept, right? Bring that to the top so they're able to make a decision. Otherwise, they turn in, we've got to mention the ostrich, Jonathan. We can't leave without the third thing in our title. And otherwise, they turn into the ostrich. And it's just what you think it is. It's an ostrich with their head in the sand. Although I think that's been debunked over there for any animal lovers. But the idea is when we overwhelm them, they shut down. It's
Right.
too much, right? And so making sure with spacing and primacy effects that we're utilizing things slowly over time and encouraging that and not making them shut down and not having them just stop dead in the path.
Because it's the holidays and you could be walking into that meeting, you could already be overloaded by something in your personal life, right? I think a lot of us, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm not in a bad way, but I have more things to do in the month of December than probably any
Than
other
all
month.
year.
Right. So the way that I would walk into is I'm already preconditioned in somewhat of an emotionally charged state. Again, just not like if you add something else, I'm gonna tip over because I've already got, tons of things to do, right?
And really good example because what you just told us, Tina, now every financial advisor out there should say, I don't think I ought to schedule my client meetings for the month of December. And
Yeah.
look, Tina's like, holy crud, you had a financial advisor meeting and I've just fallen over, right? Probably not the best month. Put it off to at least January or make those work wherever those people are in their lives that it feels where their emotional state is pulled down and can make good decisions.
Right. And that primacy effect saying, like, look, I know the most important thing that we're dealing with this right now with you is this. I'm not going to ask you to make a decision about it. Spacing effect. We're going to carry it over until we know that we're going to be meeting next month. So we're going to pick a different time. I'm just planting the seed right now. Right.
Bingo, she's got it.
I'm so like I
Just
said, this is an
imagine.
hour of empowerment here. In addition to the book, you've got lots of resources. Again, this is a power hour of knowledge here, and that you both have I want to hear from both of you on this question that, what are the additional resources, that go beyond this book if we want to dig deeper into these philosophies and master them in our 2024, a lot of goal setting here, and a lot of empowerment to be better versions of ourselves.
Well, this is the scary part. When Jonathan and I get together, not only do we come up with really crazy book titles, but we come up with really grand ideas.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to put some hearts in the chat. I welcome all the heart reactions that everybody else wants to put then as well too. We would love to hear. Give us some of those ideas. Be bold. We're great with it.
Well, I will get it started. And Jonathan, I'm going to pass the baton your way. Is the fact that I've, over the last 2 years, have been creating this group, Financial Behavior Keynote Group, of a lot of really smart people that can do amazing things. So we have a speakers agency, we have an education platform and a consulting group, and we have been growing. In fact, Tina, just to give you an example, we started with 4 people in January of this year. We are now just signed our 32nd speaker and instructor, and that all happened in the last 6 months. So we have
Wow.
been really busy growing internally, and next year we're going to grow externally. That is our number one focus. And Jonathan and his team, look at her with all the
I'm
balloons.
like, I have to just send you a whole bunch of balloons there. That is huge.
It
It's a
is. It's
huge
been a
statement.
fun and exciting. Now, Jonathan, do you want to give them some insight of that external growth?
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing is we're launching a new learning management system and platform that will allow all of these experts in financial behavior and to be able to present their expertise. And so we're really excited that if you follow us along, we'll launch in January. We might launch a little bit in a couple of weeks, but you know how a launch is. But we'll definitely be launching no later than January, and it's really exciting that you'll have exposure to a lot of really smart people in this field about how to kind of level up your skills, improve your practice, and and in some cases also get your continuing education if you need that as well. So we're really excited about it.
One
That's
example, Tina, if you like this topic, Jonathan and I go more in depth on the platform. And then we're also going to be breaking out courses on various topics that can be short, they can be at your pace. We'll have both live and on demand options. And it is going to cover a large swath, everything from DEI to practice management to behavioral economics, you name it. And we're going to have it on this platform for both consumers as well as other B2B professionals. So we're really excited about what this is going to look like coming up.
You've got a really busy 2024 already. I
We
know
do.
that you're also, Stu, you're speaking at the Shift conference along our CEO, Kelly Waltrick, co-founder. She also too is going to be at Shift. Lots of people are going to be there. I wanted to make sure that everybody got a link in the chat as well. And Stephanie already is going to Shift. She can't wait. Of course you are. I think, last year's event was fantastic. This year is going to be even better. So lots of great things in 2024. And again, you guys all know how much, again, appreciate you all so much that you show up here, whether or not that you're live or listening to the replay, because Mary, Jonathan, you've all been so gracious with your time. Again, you've got kids and you've got practices and you've got businesses and you've got a growing company. So we appreciate the time. I think that, I don't know about everybody else, but the way that I'm approaching conversations, even how I construct my own communications and email, you have had influence over that. And that's something that I'm really grateful for.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tina.
It's been a real pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, appreciate terrific interview. Mary says, Mary, thank you. We appreciate you as well. Kina says that she's grateful for this call, a gift right in time for the holidays. So with that, everyone, great. Thank you so much, Ricky. Ricky says, thank you. John says that it was a
Hey,
great
John.
interview. We appreciate you all so much. A happy and healthy blessings to all. And we'll see you in 2024. Please keep us posted with the launch of that platform.
We will. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.